Good afternoon. And welcome to the Alper Initiative for Washington Art in the American University Museum at the Katzen Art Center on Ward Circle at the top of Embassy Row in your nation's capital. The Alper Initiative presents exhibitions and programs and provides resources for the study and encouragement of our creative communities, art, and conversations. Vikan, the former director of the Walters Art Gallery in Baltimore, as well as the curator of medieval art, his most recent book is The Shroud of Turin. He's the reason we are here today. He brought me this crazy idea of doing a show of one drawing. And in a dark room, I guess. And so I didn't know what to think, except that, Gary is, he's known to be very smart, and he's certainly a lot of fun, and so I decided to take a chance. This was several years ago. This is what, 3 or 4 years in the making, this exhibition. Joining Gary on the panel is going to be David G. Stork, adjunct professor at Stanford University, and is considered to be the founder of the use of artificial intelligence in the analysis of art, and not just the physical analysis, but also the revelation of its meaning. I can't wait to hear more. If you'd like to read more, this is his most recent book, Pixels and Painting, Foundations of Computer-Assisted Connoisseurship. Really interesting stuff today. And finally, the reason we are all here. We have Billy Pappas. Where's Billy? Oh, good, you came. Yay! Indeed, yes. An artist from Baltimore. He graduated from the Maryland Institute College of Art and created this utterly amazing, mind-boggling portrait of Marilyn Monroe. So sit back, relax, and enjoy what I'm sure will be a fascinating conversation. There will be time left at the end for questions. I think we're going to start with David Stork, and then after that we're going to have the panel, David and the panel join in over there and have a conversation. And at the end, we will have questions. And so I hope that you will all participate. This is a great opportunity to talk to some really smart people. So without further ado, let me welcome up David G. Stork.
Well, thank you very, very much, and thank you all for coming. And especially thanks to Billy Pappas for putting in yeoman's work. That's such an understatement on this remarkable drawing. So I'd like to talk about Billy Pappas, Gerrit and refined minuteness. Billy Pappas's Marilyn Monroe from 2003 is a drawing in graphite on paper, 40.6 by 56 centimeters, based heavily on Richard Avedon's photograph, Marilyn Monroe, actress, New York, 1957, as referent. Monroe, then age 29, had pranced, sung, flirted, and played around Avedon's studio in May. But at the end of the day, a bit tired, sat quietly in a corner where the photographer took his iconic half-length portrait, which is rightly celebrated for capturing the introspection, the insecurity, the person behind the icon of the silver screen. The uniform gray background, her frontal, almost passive pose, but especially her downcast eyes, unself-consciously parted lips that show no indication of speaking or having spoken, all draw us to speculate on her character, her thoughts, her feelings. Pappas pushes further, though, and crops the image at the neck, retains the featureless background, but omits the sparkly black dress straps, and thereby strips the portrait to its bare essentials. No strong lighting, no recognizable setting, no partner, no props, no costume, no action, no color. While her beauty remains, this is not a work of flattery. Our knowledge that just 5 years after Avedon's portrait, Monroe would take her own life through an overdose of barbiturates draws us into searching for answers to not merely who, but also why. Leonardo wrote, "The good painter has to paint two principal things, that is to say, man and the intention of his mind. The first is easy, the second is difficult," and showed his mastery of the latter in all his portraits, most notably Lady with an Ermine and La Belle Ferronnière. So too, Pappas's portrait is like an X-ray of Monroe's mind. This drawing is as unadorned, concentrated, pure, and honest an image of a celebrity as has ever been drawn. It is not simply the cropping, subject matter, and general design that reveal the actress as never before. The power of the work also stems from Pappas's unique technique and Herculean effort to render unprecedented detail, of which more below. What in the artist's background might have led to the creation of this remarkable drawing? Pappas was born in New York and grew up in a working-class home in Baltimore, where the visual arts were not particularly valued. He showed an early talent and drive that ultimately led to studies at the Maryland Institute College of Arts in Baltimore. His early works included competent but undistinguished portraits and pencil drawings that mixed nature and domestic interiors, presumably executed in part from photographs. These small drawings display an understated humor, where, for instance, frogs wear human-like expressions and are mirrored, as in a kaleidoscope, in the paper-cut designs over the kitchen table. Such animal drawings would serve well as illustrations in a high-budget children's book. Think an update of Wind in the Willows. Pappas was waiting tables in 1994 when he began Marilyn Monroe, determined to produce a drawing of unprecedented detail beyond what might be apparent in Avedon's photograph and even beyond what others thought possible for the medium of graphite drawing. He was inspired by cultural figures who pushed their missions to the extreme and were fundamentally self-reliant, such as singer-guitarist Pete Townsend of The Who and aviator Charles Lindbergh. Pappas worked nearly nonstop for several months, at which time he spoke with Gary Vikan, a museum director at the Walters Art Museum, who recognized the importance, if perhaps not the full scale, of Pappas's quest. Vikan encouraged Pappas and helped him secure financial support so he could devote himself full-time to the drawing. Pappas had, by then, demonstrated his monk-like discipline and established his glacial drawing pace of roughly 1 square millimeter per 8-hour day, about the area inside of an O on a small typeface. It seems that nobody then did the simple arithmetic to establish how long the full project would take, over 8 years, or more than twice as long as Michelangelo took on the Sistine Chapel ceiling. Pappas worked on Marilyn Monroe, his sole project, roughly 8 hours per day, 6 days a week. He stood before the vertically mounted paper and wore, at times, high-powered loop or 3 stacked pairs of magnifying eyeglasses in order to see the extraordinary detail in his work. He found, however, that such optics made visible the tiny oscillations in his hand and pencil due to his heartbeat. So he retreated somewhat, lowering the magnification. He also used a sling to support his arm, lest it tire and twitch and thereby prevent him from executing precise, minuscule marks. Pappas used graphite mechanical pencil and resharpened the tip of its tip after nearly every mark. So a mark could be as small as 0.0005 square millimeters, or about 200,000 carbon atoms across. He consulted Avedon's photograph, other photographs of Monroe, micrographs of skin, 4 live women and himself as models, primarily to capture the subtle details in hair, skin, pores, and moles. Although most of Pappas's drawing time involved viewing and working on an area the size of a period at the end of this sentence, on occasion he had to step back and zoom out to ensure that the work cohered stylistically over its full surface. Pappas's praxis allowed him to overcome the inherent optical limitations of depth of field in Avedon's photograph. That is, the fact that objects at all depths cannot be simultaneously in perfect focus. The human visual system does not suffer from limited depth of field. We naturally and automatically refocus our eyes, so-called accommodate, so that wherever we direct our visual attention, that object is in focus. Both in resolution and depth of field, then, Pappas's drawing captures what Avedon's camera simply cannot. Just one person can experience this drawing at a time, making the experience quite intimate. The only way to see and thus fully appreciate the detail in the drawing is to use a loupe or magnifying glass. I have spent hours studying an extremely high-resolution digital scan of the work on a high-resolution computer monitor, which, while satisfying, cannot convey the physicality and the rich surface structure of this drawing. Each individual hair and eyelash is rendered as a full cylinder, including tapering. When the hair fills the field of view, it resembles a scuba diver's view of a bed of tube seaweed. The vellus hairs, especially on her cheek at the right, seem to glow, and is due to thin lines of exposed paper, unmarked by graphite. The iris pattern is so detailed that it is likely that computer iris recognition software applied to this drawing would confirm the sitter's identity. Experiencing the work in the flesh, so to speak, demands viewing from different distances or under a range of magnifications. And this leads to a perceptual phenomenon produced by several other drawings and paintings in the Western canon. Once we've seen the extraordinary detail, the modeling of a few eyelashes, say, or the gnarled surface of a mole, and then step back to view the work as a whole, such that we cannot see the full detail, we nevertheless remember the detail. Our perception is then a mixture of what we see, details we have seen, and details that we merely think we may be seeing. An analogous perceptual phenomenon occurs when viewing Georges Seurat's Sunday Afternoon on the island of La Grande Jatte. From close, where the pointless brushstrokes are clearly visible, and then from a large distance, where we can only remember having seen the individual brushstrokes. We are drawn close to Marilyn, then pushed back, thinking we know what we see, then realizing that we do not, much like the general public's unsettled understanding of the film star's persona. Pappas's quest to secure an audience and endorsement from artist David Hockney, as recounted in the documentary Waiting for Hockney, was an exercise in delay and frustration worthy of Samuel Beckett. Given Pappas's single-mindedness and perseverance, though, success was all but assured. In addition to Hockney's wide acclaim as a painter, set designer, and photographer, Pappas was intrigued by Hockney's extremely controversial claim that some early Renaissance artists directly traced optical projections, and that this technique was a source of a novel optical look in art of that time. Hockney's tracing theory has been unanimously rejected by independent optical and image scientists, curators, and historians of optics and art, at least for the early dates he claims. However, for decades, a number of scholars have explored the weaker hypothesis that some artists may have seen projected images and that this influenced their art. The effect of photography on fine art painting in the 19th century was profound, leading to changes in composition, for instance, the snapshot composition, and the use of photographs as reference, and the economics of patronage, and much, much more. Optics is, of course, an essential component in Pappas's drawing, from Avedon's Rolleiflex camera to Pappas's stacked eyeglasses to the viewer's magnifying glasses. Naturally, Monroe's fame was entirely dependent upon still cameras for her early pinup career and upon complex movie cameras for her film career. Optics has affected the development of the visual arts, but except in a handful of cases, quite possibly in the 17th and certainly in the 18th century, and later, only occasionally through artists tracing projected images, despite Hockney's well-publicized claims. How does Pappas's achievement stem from broader trends in the development of art and art praxis? The most obvious precedents based on the resolution and fidelity to a photographic referent are, of course, the photorealists, such as Richard Estes, Robert Bechtel, John Bader, Malcolm Morley, and the early Chuck Close, as well as hyperrealists such as Charles Bell, Jolf Sparney, Glenn Tudor, and others. It would, however, be a mistake to focus on a few surface similarities between Pappas's drawing and the work of these artists. First, these artists worked in oil or acrylic. The thinnest paint mark these artists can make is far thicker than those Pappas makes, because even a single brush hair is flexible and paint is viscous, has surface adhesion, and spreads on the primed canvas. Moreover, the hyperrealists seek to add detail beyond that of their referent photograph, but do so by relying on knowledge of what the subject must look like at a smaller scale. When Malcolm Morley painted Empire Monarch from a postcard, that extra detail he added to the cruise ship came from his knowledge of ships, windows, water, and so forth. The closer we inspect these paintings, the more we confirm what we know. In contrast, Pappas, through his fixity of purpose and use of optical elements, sees and then draws the details that elude the casual viewer in nearly all hyperrealists. But Pappas's most salient difference with the vast majority of hyperrealists is in subject matter and stance. Most hyperrealists take a distant, ironic stance and generally render the inanimate, the popular, pinball machines, shiny automobiles, cityscapes, and such. Even Vija Selmans, who executes very detailed drawings from photographs, concentrates on reference such as astrophotographs of the surface of the moon or star fields. Quite a difference from Pappas's sober interest in, respect for, and empathy for his very human subject. Pappas's treatment of Monroe is the polar opposite of that of the visual artist most widely associated with the film icon. I took this picture yesterday in the National Gallery in Washington. Well, Andy Warhol's serigraphs are flat, repeated widely, show an almost careless spreading of inks, and are industrial, and thus devoid of the artist's hand. Pappas's drawing is truly one of a kind, executed at a pace Warhol could barely conceive, and possessing a subtlety in modeling at the limits of the human eye and hand. A more revealing precedent is Gerrit Dow, who lived from 1613 to 1675, who was Rembrandt's first student and enjoyed a high reputation for his extraordinary patience and detailed renderings in still lifes and faces. Dow would, at times, put on 3 pairs of eyeglasses, quote, even when he was young, as reported by Joachim van Sandaert, so as to see the finest details, both in the subject and in painting. He may have used an optical device consisting of a square grid of threads over a concave mirror and a diverging lens as a form of telescope. Before working, he would sit motionless in his studio to let the dust in his studio settle before he would retrieve his brushes and paints, stored in a chest in order to keep them clean. One observer noted that he took 5 days to paint a single hand, likely just a few millimeters across. admittedly a breakneck pace compared to Pappas, yeah, but still. And so here is Gerrit Dow's The Young Mother. It's only about this big. To show you the detail, we look at this small detail here and expand it up. And you can see all this incredible detail in the stained glass window. Take a detail here, blow it up, and we can see yet more fine detail. Take that, take a detail, and blow it up. And you can see the fingers on the hand, on the baby, on the stained glass window, and then look back at the original to get a sense of where that was. In 1641, Jan Zoon Orlers described Dow as an excellent master, especially as regards small, subtle, and curious things. Writers marveled Dow's mastery of microscopic details, a, quote, refined minuteness, as noted by critic Simon van Leeuwen at the time. Contemporary critics felt that Dow's work exceeded what anyone thought was possible in painting, and lavished praise on his works that so perfectly resembled nature that they did not reveal the artist's methods. In short, capturing reality this way, the best artists lose all marks of their own hand. It is hard to predict how Marilyn might influence future arts, drawing in particular, and our broader understanding of art. Perhaps this work will find a home on the wall of a collector or a public venue such as the National Portrait Gallery. The monk-like dedication and sheer magnitude of the effort Pappas invested in that work ensures that only the most committed artists would dare follow in his footsteps. It would also help if they did not need a steady income from their art making. The fact that the artist himself has not executed a second such portrait in nearly 2 decades reinforces this point. It may turn out that Marilyn spawns no direct derivative works, no descendants, no children, much as the actress spawned none. The drawing may be the last in an evolutionary line, so to speak. If, alas, this is the case, we nevertheless have the remarkable record, and like the actress who remains so present in our consciousness, we can admire it as a unique accomplishment and contribution to our culture. Thanks very much.
Microphone. Can everyone hear? No, turn it on. There you go. Push it up. There you go.
Okay, better, all right. So in the 21 and a half years it's been since I finished this, I've had some time to think. I didn't write my comments down, but I kind of know what I want to say. There's a line in John Lennon's beautiful Christmas song, and it says, "What's old is what's new." That's appropriate to keep in mind here today. I would bet everyone here has held a pencil. Maybe you're on hold with an insurance company. Might doodle. Or maybe you've written a note in a hurry and grabbed a pencil. In fact, even my nieces, who are 6 and 7 or 10, very much about touchscreens, I know they've held a pencil. So let's think about the proletariat's view of this thing for a moment. I remember the day that was a white piece of paper. Fabriano Uno was the brand and the model, the type of paper. And I remember that piece of white paper in my car as I drove home, keen to get started. And it's only a piece of white paper and a pencil. It doesn't get much more mundane or simple, humble than that. So what I hope for a takeaway is that we reconsider the limits of what are putatively regarded as simple things. And I think that's worthwhile. And if in fact I did expand the boundaries of the visual lexicon, maybe I did. Maybe I pushed further and caused some of us to reconsider the limits of some things. But you can't see my signature on that drawing, and there's a reason for that. Ultimately, it's not important that I did it. For me, it's important that it was done, that it exists, and its analog exists now, no matter the discipline. So if I've added to a discipline as old and broad and human as drawing, I'll be forever proud of that. Thank you.
Well, what can I offer except hearing you, Billy, reminds me that I should talk into this thing.
Turn it down first.
And that I should push the button now. No wonder I'm no longer a museum director. Anyway, it reminds me of the first time Billy came into my office in 1996. And he was introduced by somebody, a mutual friend, who thought what he was doing would be of interest to me. And he had a big wooden box that had screws in it. And he told me a story, and he opened the big wooden box with the screws in it. And we got a lamp so we could see it. And all I could think about is, do not sneeze. Watch out for the cord on the lamp. If you trip, that is the life of a person in front of you. And so 18 months would go by, and Billy would bring it back, and I would look at it, and it seemed exactly the same as it was 19 months before. And this went on for a long time. And he would talk much as he just spoke, with a kind of earnest, robust, informed, passionate conviction, as I struggled to figure out what he was doing. So I was on a committee at the Baltimore Museum of Art more than 20 years ago to celebrate the life of somebody who died young from AIDS. And in honor of this person, David Hockney was invited to speak at the Baltimore Museum of Art. And I had just gotten back from a trip to Europe. You know, when you arrive at 4 in the afternoon and you're all buzzed up. And ordinarily I wouldn't have gone to this lecture, but I was so steamed up about what David Hockney was saying about optics and what was and wasn't possible for everybody from Duccio forward, that I went and I corralled him after his talk, and I harangued him in a way that only somebody who'd been on an airplane for 11 hours could possibly come up with. And it was out of that conversation that we finally, probably 4 years later or so, ended up on Mulholland Drive. And that photograph, and then I'll be done in 1 second, that photograph you see on the wall over there, I remember I took the photograph. In fact, I took a bunch of photographs. As we arrived there, we had our video guy, a very accomplished filmmaker, who wasn't allowed to go into the room. I happened to have my camera with me, so I went in. And we were with David Hockney for 4.5 hours. That's a long time. That's a whole lot of cigarettes. And at a certain point, when I think he was at a loss for something to say, he said, "Billy, how did you get those hairs on her neck? Those little faint hairs on her neck." And if you look at the photograph, you can see that he's looking at Billy's neck. And Billy says, "There's nothing there. It's the absence of graphite that makes the presence of the hair." And he was absolutely dumbfounded. So yes, it's been quite an adventure. And thank you.
I would just ask the question to Billy. The great portraitist Alice Neal said, I think it was she who said, the hardest thing in painting is to start a painting. The second hardest thing is to stop a painting. And basically, did you conceive of what you were starting when you started it? You said, "Oh, I'm going to do a really detailed." Did you know? Do you do this simple calculation to say, this is going to be 8.5 years of my life?
So yes, and then no, because I had known what it's like to spend a couple of thousand hours on a piece, but I didn't yet realize just how much work this was going to be. For example, I use magnifiers on some older pieces, but I never used 2 layers of magnification before, where I was seeing through 2 lenses, and then when I had and then with the eyeglasses, that would be a 3rd lens. So no, I didn't realize it was going to take this long. But then it took a few years for me to settle in and say, okay, so I'm really in over my head, and this is going to be what it's going to be, but I didn't want to compromise the quality of the work or my mission.
Billy, on the title outside, it says 9 million marks. And somebody might justifiably ask, how do you know? How do you know?
So that's a great question, and I'll give you a short answer. The longer, more complete answer is on my website, so check that out. Like many of the good ideas you see surrounding you, they were Gary Vikan's ideas, everyone. And he had asked me that, how many marks do you think you made? Well, I had never thought of that. So, and I don't consider myself good at math, so I worked within the math I knew, and kept it very simple, and I redrew the most common areas of the piece, which are the background, the hair, and the skin. And I redrew each area in 1/8 inch squares. And here's the kicker, is I counted the marks I was putting down as I was trying to draw the subjects. So that's asking too much of one brain. And it was very difficult. It would be like a guitarist playing a lead part and singing a vocal at the same time, and you don't see that. There's a reason you don't see that. That's what this was. So I recorded my voice and called out the marks, and that was as much as I could do to grip the one side, the mathematical side, and then the visual side. So if anything, that 9 million is low. because it doesn't account for the mouth, which was all of 10 months of 1999 was the mouth. And yeah, I would get up. You know, we all have jobs, right? Well, I would get up. I'd put on coffee. I'd put on lipstick, and I'd go to work. And so I worked from left to right. And looking in the mirror, I would start with this side of the mouth and go this way. And there are pictures of this underway. Also, you can see it on the website. But I would do that, and for this part, for one side of my lips, I would only need to. I learned, you know, when you're doing something every day, you get better at it. You figure out shortcuts, and I learned that I only needed the half of my mouth done in lipstick on which I was working. But I had to, even if I was doing the top lip, I had to have the bottom lip done because the gloss would cast light on the top lip, and that was essential. So, you know, ladies out there may know what I'm talking about. So, well, one quick anecdote. I was living, when I did the mouth, I was living on the Eastern Shore, which is famous for its conservative culture. Eastern Shore of Maryland. And I had figured out my road to victory with the mouth. And one day, my good friend who owned the house there and was kind enough to host me, he is an Eastern Shore native. His father was a waterman. He was a bit older than me, so his father was actually one of the last watermen. Anyway, he saw me with my mouth ablaze, and he had never said to me, "This is my house." You know, you can't do this. And he just put both hands in the air and said, "All I ask is that you don't leave the house like that."
Question, because it's so incredibly detailed, how did you know when you put the last mark onto the drawing?
That was my question.
We would like to know.
Yes.
How did you know which one was the last mark?
So the way this technique works is I have to designate a small area and essentially finish it, because I need the reference for the right tone in the next area. So it's a bit like building a puzzle. And if you have a jigsaw puzzle on a table, you either have it all finished or nothing finished. And those areas of finished paper I would get them to where I thought, okay, that is finished. Here and there, I would have to go back and add a little bit. But I don't have the best answer for this question, but I would basically finish a small area and then use that as a stake in the ground, as an anchor for the next adjacent area, and move on from that.
I have a two-part question.
Sorry, 1 second. Hang on.
I'm sorry. So to be clear, there's no erasure. There was never an erasure.
There were erasures.
There were
yes.
erasures. Okay. And I guess my second part of that is, did you ever make a mistake that you felt you couldn't come back from, and how did you deal with that?
So they're really good questions. Okay. Yes, I made mistakes. At first, I had made the background much too dark. And one day I realized it, and that was not a good day. Because I took a clean, kneaded eraser, and I very gently picked up the graphite that I deemed excessive, thank you. And then, so it took about 10 minutes to pick up that graphite. It took 5.5 months to put it back the right way. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, and so I would try to erase as little as possible.
I have a question. Hey, Billy, thank you so much for, it's just so incredibly moving to see this singular piece of beauty that you've created, and so thank you so much. But also, do you have any advice for an aspiring artist who, not me, you know it's not me, but who is, I guess what I'm asking is, does that kind of patience and monk-like attitude toward your art come naturally, or is there hope for a young artist who does not have such patience and dedication? How could she develop such a habit?
Asking for a friend.
Exactly.
Yes, I think it came in stages and steps. Sure. You have to have a certain idea and you have to be a certain type of person, obviously, to get in this game. But certainly, I remember doing drawings, and I remember doing a drawing of a lion's head from a photograph. I was 13 or 14, and I remember thinking, wow, that took me 33 hours. So that's a lot of time if you're 13. And and I was proud of that, but I was proud of that because of the result I got. It gave me a result, and I thought, yeah. So I would just say, step at a time.
Yeah, thanks for sharing this with us. It's only, hearing the story is so much more, the process is so much more than just the finished piece. How did you feel as you were getting 99% of the way done, and you knew that you and Marilyn would be parting ways? How did that feel?
I was ready. I was thrilled to be finished. I had someone said to me, "I've been pregnant. I could not be pregnant that long." And I do remember when I was 2 or 3 months away from finishing. I knew very well, but by then I was getting close. And I remember we were from Queens originally, and we had to go up there for something, and I was like, I don't want to go anywhere until I finish this thing, because I was so close, you know. And that's something worth a comment all on its own. Yeah, I did this. I drew this. I made this drawing. But in terms of doing anything by yourself, I don't feel like I did it by myself. There's someone in the room here who introduced me to Gary Vikan. If I did not meet that person, and so on, would I have gotten the piece finished, or would I be halfway finished by now? I don't know. I doubt it. So I think about car crashes and so many things that can happen to us that could derail us from a project of just a couple of months, never mind 9 years. So it's really a beautiful thing that all these variables stayed constant for me to finish that. It's remarkable. And it's lucky. So, you know, be lucky.
And your friends, many close friends, have been part of this over the years, and you could speak for them, or perhaps they would speak for themselves. They clearly are very proud of you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Absolutely. I mentioned this at the opening. What would this be if I couldn't share it?
And I'm sorry if I didn't quite catch this in earlier comments. What was your inspiration to approach not just this image, but with this technique?
That's a good question, and the answer is very simple. I've always been a bit of a naturalist. So I wrote for the catalog. I hope everyone gets a chance to read it, but it wasn't uncommon in my childhood to have Roger Tory Peterson's field guide within arm's reach, and the field guide to reptiles and amphibians, and so on. And my love for nature, my way of expressing my love for nature is to take myself out of the experience and just try to be a medium between it and you, my audience. And that's why I appreciated Dr. Stork's mention of the limits of the photomechanical process, how focus can't be everywhere, but our binocular scrutiny can be. It's a huge difference. So I want to give that treatment to my subjects in reverence for my subjects. And this time it was Homo sapiens' turn.
Any more questions?
So when you were drawing, it doesn't look like you were wearing a mask at all. But when you're with David Hockney looking at the drawing, you are wearing masks. Why?
Did everyone hear the question? Okay, so when I was with Hockney, I was wearing a mask. When I was drawing, I was not wearing masks. There are stains on this drawing that are not supposed to be there. It's it's a person doing a thing, and we all make mistakes. So there are some stains which went onto the paper in the early part. But what I learned to do was breathe differently. I had to teach myself how to breathe differently to do that. That's why I didn't need a mask. That's a really good question.
Any other questions?
Jack, before you proceed, I want to thank you and your staff. You do a great job.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And if he doesn't mind, would Larry Link stand up for some applause?
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Oh, what? Hold on.
I remember when you were, while you were drawing it, you and we were trying to come up with a term to describe your technique, like so future generations could say, this is how this was done. Has such a term been thought of yet?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. I've got it. We call it drawing.
what's next? What else have we got coming from you? It's,
So what is next? My hope is to draw at least one more. That has always been my hope. So there's issues largely related to funding for that. So we'll see what emerges, but I definitely want to do one more, and I've been asked, well, the first one's finished, so probably the second one with the learning curve and everything will take about 5 years, right? I said, no, it's actually gonna take the same amount of time. Yes. That I'm certain of. I am doing a demonstration. I'm doing a drawing of my right eye from a mirror, and I am photographing it every other day. That will eventually be on the website to complement this show and help to further explain how I do this.
Billy, what's the URL for everybody? Is that the bpdrawing.com?
So yes, bpdrawing.com or billypappas.com. They will mirror each other.
Can I ask one more question? So are those really your lips or Marilyn's lips? And what about the irises?
So that's a good question. So they are Marilyn's lips, but I had to look at three-dimensional subjects in order to render more visual information than a camera possibly could. So in order to, the only way to get beyond photography, I can't consult photography. And a lot of the photographic references I gathered ended up becoming rather useless to me. Where they were useful, for example, is the freckles and wrinkles you see on Marilyn's breast area above, near her neck. They are real. I could document them through looking at many, many photographs. So that's where photography helped me. And for example, I saw one picture of her where it was a pure profile. That's very helpful if you're trying to do something like this. But so they were her lips. You can see what I used as a start in the Avedon photos, and then I used mine for the surface detail.
I have a question, Billy. So drawing's fun. You do a drawing, it's exciting to see it come together. 8 years of drawing, the same drawing. What degree did you find that, I know funness isn't a word, but did you lose some of that fun? And
Yes. Yes. 3 days of every week, I would have rather been on a tennis court or in a canoe. But the payoff for me was finishing it and accomplishing what I set out to do, because I did accomplish what I set out to do, which is really feels good.
As a writer, I've always turned to, I think it was Faulkner who said, I hate writing, but I love having written.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you all for coming, and a big hand for our wonderful panel. Thank you, Gerrit.